My name is Margaret Walsh, and I'm 68 years old. For 43 years, I've carried a secret that nearly killed me. Tonight, as I sit in my quiet apartment in Boston, watching the snow fall outside my window, I've finally decided to tell the truth about the night I almost died, and the stranger who saved my life. It was December 15th, 1980. I was 25 years old, married for 2 years to a man everyone thought was perfect. David Walsh was a rising star at a prestigious law firm, handsome, charming, and came from old Boston money. To the outside world, we were the golden couple, if only they knew what happened behind closed doors. David's transformation began slowly, like a disease spreading through our marriage. It started with small criticisms. My cooking wasn't good enough. My clothes were inappropriate. My friends were beneath us. Then came the isolation. One by one, he found reasons why I couldn't see my family, my college friends, anyone who might notice the changes in me. "You don't need them, Maggie," he'd say, his voice honey-sweet but his eyes cold as winter. "You have me. I'm all you'll ever need." The first time he hit me, it was 3 months into our marriage. I'd accidentally overcooked his steak, and his hand flew across my face so fast I barely saw it coming. Immediately, he was apologetic, crying, begging my forgiveness. "I'm so sorry, darling. The stress at work. You know I'd never hurt you. You're my whole world." I believed him. God help me. I believed him every single time. By 1980, the beatings had become routine. David was methodical, careful. He never hit my face where it would show. Always my ribs, my back, places hidden by clothing. He had a lawyer's mind for evidence, and a predator's instinct for control. The psychological torture was worse than the physical abuse. He convinced me I was worthless, stupid, lucky that anyone would want me. He monitored my every move, timed my trips to the grocery store, checked the mileage on my car. "Who would believe you?" He'd whisper after particularly brutal sessions. "I'm David Walsh. You're nobody. Just a pathetic little girl who can't do anything right." I was disappearing, piece by piece. The vibrant young woman who'd graduated summa cum laude from Wellesley was becoming a ghost, terrified of her own shadow. December 15th started like any other day in hell. David came home from work angry about a case he'd lost. I could see it in his eyes immediately. Tonight would be bad. "Where's my dinner?" he demanded, though he was 2 hours earlier than usual. I wasn't expecting you yet. I can have something ready in 20 minutes. His smile was terrifying. 20 minutes. I work my ass off to keep you in this beautiful home, and you can't even have my dinner ready when I get home. The beating that followed was the worst yet. For 2 hours, David systematically tortured me with a cruelty that still haunts my nightmares. He used his fists, a leather belt, anything within reach, all while telling me exactly how worthless I was, how I deserved every blow. "No one will ever love you like I do," he panted as I lay bleeding on our bedroom floor. "No one will ever want you. You're damaged goods, Maggie. Broken. I'm the only one who'll ever put up with you." That's when something inside me snapped. Not my body, David, had been breaking that for months, but something deeper. My spirit, my will to live, my acceptance of this nightmare as my fate. As I lay there, blood in my mouth and ribs, screaming with pain, I heard a voice, my own voice whisper, "This is not how your story ends." David had gone downstairs to pour himself a drink, celebrating another successful session of terrorizing his wife. This was my chance. Maybe my only chance. I crawled to the phone beside our bed, my vision blurred but my purpose crystal clear. I didn't call the police. David played golf with half the force, and they all thought he was a pillar of the community. I didn't call my parents. He'd made it clear what would happen to them if I ever told anyone. Instead, I called a number I'd memorized months ago but never had the courage to dial. A women's crisis hotline I'd seen advertised in a magazine at the doctor's office. "Crisis hotline, this is Janet. How can I help you?" The voice was warm, professional, immediately focused on me in a way no one had been for years. I think my husband is going to kill me," I whispered. "Are you safe right now?" He's downstairs. But he'll be back soon. When he comes back, I couldn't finish. What's your name, honey? Margaret. Margaret Walsh. There was a pause. Margaret, I need you to listen very carefully. Are you badly hurt? I tried to describe my injuries, but everything hurt so much I could barely think straight. Margaret, I'm going to help you, but you need to be very brave for me. Can you get out of the house? I don't have anywhere to go. He took my car keys, my credit cards. He controls everything. Don't worry about that. I'm sending someone to get you right now. Her name is Susan. She'll be there in 15 minutes. Can you pack a small bag? Just essentials. What if he comes back before she gets here? Then you leave with nothing but the clothes on your back. Your life is more important than anything else. Do you understand me? For the first time in 2 years, someone was treating me like a human being who mattered. Susan arrived exactly when Janet said she would. I heard 3 soft knocks on the front door, our pre-arranged signal. When I opened it, I saw a woman about 40, with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of hard work and determination. Margaret. I nodded, unable to speak. Oh, sweetheart, she whispered, taking in my battered appearance. Let's get you out of here. I'd managed to throw a few clothes into a bag, but as we headed for the door, I heard David's footsteps on the stairs. He was coming back. Go, Susan whispered urgently. Out the back now. We slipped out through the kitchen door, just as I heard David calling my name from upstairs. His voice was different now, confused, then angry, then furious as he realized I was gone. As we drove away from the house where I'd been dying for 2 years, I looked back once. David was standing in the doorway, his face twisted with rage. Even from a distance, I could see the promise in his eyes. He would find me, and when he did, he would make me pay. Susan took me to a shelter I never knew existed, hidden in a converted warehouse in South Boston. It looked like nothing from the outside. But inside was a haven for women like me, women who'd escaped from hell and were trying to rebuild their lives. Welcome to new beginnings, Susan said as we walked through the door. You're safe here, Margaret. David can't hurt you anymore. The woman who ran the shelter was named Grace Martinez. She was about 50, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had seen too much suffering but hadn't lost their compassion. You made the hardest decision of your life tonight, Grace told me as a volunteer nurse tended to my injuries. The decision to value your own life. Everything else is just logistics. Over the next few days, Grace explained what would happen. I couldn't go back to my old life. David would find me and kill me. I couldn't stay in Boston. He had too many connections, too much influence. I would need a new identity, a fresh start somewhere far away. It sounds impossible, Grace said, but we've done this before. There's a network of people who help women like you disappear and start over. It's not easy, but it's possible. The transformation took 3 weeks. While I recovered from my injuries at the shelter, Grace and her network created an entirely new identity for me. Margaret Walsh died that December night in Boston. In her place, Sarah Coleman was born. Sarah was a 26-year-old teacher from Vermont, whose husband had died in a car accident. She was moving to Seattle to start over, to build a new life far from the memories of her loss. The documentation was perfect: birth certificate, social security card, teaching credentials. Even a fake wedding photo with a man I'd never met. The key to surviving, Grace explained, is becoming Sarah completely. Margaret's mannerisms, her voice, her memories, they have to stay buried. If you let Margaret surface, David will find you. Learning to be Sarah was harder than I'd imagined. I had to change everything about myself, the way I walked, talked, even thought. Margaret had been timid, broken, trained to flinch at sudden movements. Sarah needed to be confident, self-assured, capable of living independently. Seattle in 1981 was like stepping into another world. The Pacific Northwest was rainy and green, so different from Boston's cold winters. I found a small apartment near the University District, and a job teaching 3rd grade at an elementary school that didn't ask too many questions about my references. For the first time in years, I woke up without fear. No one was going to hurt me today. No one was going to tell me I was worthless, stupid, lucky to be alive. I was free. The children I taught became my salvation. They were 8 and 9 years old, full of curiosity and energy, untouched by the darkness I'd escaped. Through their eyes, I began to remember what joy looked like. But even in Seattle, I never felt completely safe. I changed my route to work every day, always checking over my shoulder, jumping at unexpected sounds. David's voice still echoed in my head. No one will ever love you. You're broken. Damaged goods. It took 5 years before I stopped looking over my shoulder every day. 10 years before I could trust a man enough to let him take me to dinner. 15 years before I understood that what David had done to me wasn't love, it was ownership, control, the systematic destruction of another human being. I became Sarah Coleman completely. I earned a master's degree in education, became a principal, then a district administrator. I helped implement programs for at-risk children, kids who reminded me of the broken little girl I'd once been. In 1995, I met James Patterson, a gentle widower who taught high school English. He was patient with my fears, understanding about my reluctance to talk about my past. When I finally told him the truth, a carefully edited version, he held me while I cried and told me that surviving made me stronger, not broken. We married in 1997. I was 42 years old and finally learning what real love looked like. In 2000, Grace Martinez contacted me. She was retiring from running the shelter, but wanted to make sure the network of people who helped women like me continued to grow. You've built a successful life, she told me during a phone call. You understand what these women are going through because you've been there. Would you consider helping? That's how I became part of the Underground Railroad for abused women. Over the next 20 years, I helped dozens of women escape situations like the one I'd fled. I provided safe houses, job references, emotional support, whatever they needed to start over. Each woman I helped was a victory over the darkness David had tried to trap me in. In 2010, 30 years after my escape, I finally faced my past. James and I were visiting Boston for his high school reunion when I saw him. David Walsh, now 65 but still handsome, still commanding attention at an upscale restaurant in Back Bay. He was with a young woman, maybe 30, beautiful, wearing expensive clothes that couldn't hide the fear in her eyes. The way she flinched when he touched her arm, the careful way she spoke, the gratitude in her voice when he complimented her outfit, I recognized all of it. David was still destroying women, just with a different victim. Excuse me, I said, approaching their table with my heart pounding. David Walsh. He looked up, and for a moment, I saw recognition flicker in his eyes, then confusion. I'd aged 30 years, changed my hair, my entire demeanor. Margaret Walsh had been mousy, terrified. Sarah Patterson was confident, successful, unafraid. I'm sorry, do we know each other? He asked smoothly. I don't think so, I replied, then turned to the young woman. My name is Sarah Patterson. I run programs for women in crisis. If you ever need help, if you ever need someone to talk to, here's my card. I placed my business card next to her plate and walked away, knowing David couldn't make a scene without drawing attention to himself. The next morning, the young woman called me. Her name was Jennifer, and her story was heartbreakingly familiar. David had swept her off her feet 2 years earlier, isolated her from family and friends, and now was systematically destroying her self-worth with the same methods he'd used on me. I don't know how to leave, she whispered during our phone call. He controls everything. He says no one else would ever want me. Jennifer, I said, using the same tone Grace had used with me 30 years earlier, I'm going to help you. But you need to be very brave for me. Within a week, Jennifer was on a plane to Portland, Oregon, with a new identity and a job waiting for her at a school where I had connections. David Walsh woke up one morning to find his victim gone, just as he had in 1980. But this time was different. This time, I made sure he knew who was responsible. I sent him a letter, unsigned but unmistakably from me. Some people survive. Some people thrive. Some people make sure other survivors get the same chance. Margaret Walsh died 30 years ago, but her memory lives on in every woman you'll never hurt again. David died in 2018. I saw his obituary in the Boston Globe, a pillar of the community. Successful lawyer, survived by his third wife and 2 children. No mention of the women he'd terrorized, the lives he'd nearly destroyed. But I know the truth. In the 38 years since I escaped, the network that saved me has helped over 3,000 women start new lives. Some became teachers like me, others nurses, doctors, lawyers, business owners. All of them are living proof that survival is possible, that you can build something beautiful from the ashes of your former life. My proudest moment came last year when Dr. Jennifer Morrison, a pediatrician in Portland, called to tell me she was getting married to a kind man who treasures her exactly as she is. "I want you to walk me down the aisle," she said through tears. "You gave me my life back. You're the closest thing to a mother I have." As I sit here tonight, snow quietly falling outside my window, I find myself holding a photograph. It's slightly faded now, the edges curled with time, but to me, it's everything. In that photo, I'm standing beside James, the love I never believed I deserved. And between us is Jennifer, radiant in her white wedding gown, tears in her eyes and joy on her lips. You wouldn't know it just by looking, but 2 of the people in that photograph once lived in hell. I tell this story now, not just because I survived, but because someone, somewhere, might need to hear that survival is possible. That broken doesn't mean beyond repair. That there is life after darkness. I was supposed to die on December 15, 1980. Not just my body, but my sense of self, my voice, my soul. And in many ways, Margaret Walsh did die that night, but from her pain, from her blood, from the ashes of her silence. A woman named Sarah was born. She was fragile at first, shaking, uncertain, afraid of her own shadow. But she walked. Then she stood. Then, one day, she ran. Sarah became a teacher. She built a quiet life. And years later, she became a wife to a man who held her not with force, but with reverence. Who saw her scars and called them strength. Who never raised his voice, never raised a hand, and yet lifted her higher than anyone ever had. And then came Jennifer, a stranger, yet somehow familiar. I saw myself in her eyes, the hesitation when she smiled, the way she flinched at kindness, the disbelief that someone could care without wanting something in return. She whispered to me once, "I don't know how to leave." And I said the words that once saved me. "You don't have to know, you just have to start, and I'll be with you." Helping Jennifer was like healing a part of myself I never thought I could reach. And when she stood in that chapel, with sunlight pouring over her like a blessing, she turned to me and said through tears, "I want you to walk me down the aisle. You didn't just save me, you became the mother I never had." My knees nearly gave out. Because in that moment, every second of suffering, every broken bone, every sleepless night, it all meant something. You see, David Walsh tried to erase me, tried to convince me I was nothing. But instead, I became the woman who would make sure he never hurt anyone the way he hurt me. And I kept going. For every Jennifer. For every woman hiding behind makeup. For every child too afraid to speak. For every soul that has been told, "You're not enough." Let me say this as clearly as I can. You are enough. You are not broken. You are not a burden. You are not too late, too far gone, or too weak to begin again. If you're listening and your heart is pounding because you see yourself in my words, please don't look away. Don't turn back. Because I've been there. I've lived in that silence. I've bled on that floor. I've watched the door, praying it wouldn't open again. And I'm here to tell you, that's not where your story ends. It's where it begins. I know it feels impossible. I know it feels like no one would believe you, that leaving will cost you everything, that no one will catch you when you fall. But I will, and so will hundreds of women who came before you. We're out here. We've built a net beneath your leap. And when you're ready, we'll be here. Margaret Walsh was supposed to die in 1980. Instead, her story became a lifeline, a legacy. Today, there are thousands of women who are alive because of a single decision. The decision to say enough, to choose themselves, to walk through fire and come out forged, not ruined. So to whoever you are, wherever you're watching this from, please remember this. You are not alone. You are not crazy. You are not what he says you are. You are light. You are love. You are still here. And that means there is still time, still hope, still a future waiting to be written by you. Sometimes, the night that almost ends you becomes the very night that saves you. And when the dust settles and the pain fades, you will look in the mirror and see a survivor, a fighter, a woman who did not let the darkness win. Because the truth is, the light always wins. And so will you.